The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under the burning sun when something fell from the sky. The object crashed into the sand with a sound like thunder, sending up clouds of dust and smoke. Rangers from the nearby military base reached the crash, site within an hour. What they found would change everything for Earth. Inside the twisted metal wreckage lay a being that looked almost human, but was clearly not from this world. She had pointed ears like the elves from old stories, and skin that seemed to shimmer with a faint blue light. Her clothes were made from materials no human had ever seen. Blood that glowed silver ran from cuts on her arms and face. Captain Lisa Martinez was flying patrol missions over the Pacific when her radio crackled to life. She had been a pilot for 10 years and had never heard such panic in a controller's voice. They ordered her to return to base immediately. Something big was happening. When Lisa landed her fighter jet at Edwards Air Force Base, soldiers rushed her to a secure building. Inside, generals and scientists crowded around computer screens showing images that made no sense. Ships were moving through space toward Earth. Not human ships. The objects were massive and shaped like nothing humans had ever built. Dr. Amy Foster had been studying languages her whole life, but she had never expected to meet someone who spoke a completely alien tongue. When they brought her to the medical bay where the crashed pilot lay unconscious, Amy felt her heart racing. This was first contact with another intelligent species. The alien woman woke up slowly, her large green eyes looking around the room, with fear and confusion. When she saw Amy, she tried to speak, but the words sounded like music, mixed with wind. Amy held up her hands to show she meant no harm and pointed to herself. She said her name slowly and clearly. The alien woman seemed to understand. She touched her own chest and said something that sounded like Zaralyn. Amy repeated the name, and the alien woman nodded. It was the beginning of communication between two species. Meanwhile, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the war room looking at data that terrified her. The approaching fleet was enormous. Hundreds of ships were heading straight for Earth. They would arrive in less than 3 days. Earth had some space-based weapons and a few experimental ships, but nothing that could fight off an invasion of this size. Zaralyn learned basic English words faster than any human could learn a new language. Within hours, she was putting together simple sentences. What she told Dr. Foster made everyone in the room go silent. The ships coming to Earth belonged to something called the Zephyrian Empire. They destroyed planets and enslaved entire species. Zaralyns, people, the Valorians, had been free once. They lived on beautiful worlds and created amazing technology. Then the Zephyrians came. They killed millions and forced the survivors to work in mines and factories. Zaralyn had escaped when other Valorian prisoners created a distraction during a supply run. She had stolen the small ship and flown toward Earth because her people had been watching human broadcasts for years. They knew humans were developing space technology and thought they might be strong enough to fight the Zephyrians. Most Valorians thought this was foolish hope, but Zaralyn believed humans might be different from other species the Zephyrians had conquered. Lisa Martinez listened to the briefing about the alien threat and felt anger building inside her. Earth was her home, and no one was going to take it without a fight. She volunteered to lead the defense mission even though everyone knew it was probably suicide. Her ship, the Aurora, was humanity's most advanced spacecraft, but it was tiny compared to the approaching alien vessels. Dr. Foster worked with Zaralyn to understand more about Zephyrian technology. The Empire used energy weapons that could slice through metal like paper. Their ships had shields that could stop most attacks. Worst of all, they had done this to dozens of worlds before Earth. They had a system for breaking the spirit of any species they encountered. The Zephyrians would arrive with overwhelming force and demand surrender. If a planet refused, they would destroy major cities as examples. Most species gave up after seeing their cities burned. Those that continued to fight were hunted down and killed. The survivors became slaves. But Zaralyn told them something else about the Zephyrians. They were used to fighting species that thought like they did. They expected organized militaries with clear command structures. They expected enemies who followed rules of war and tried to minimize civilian casualties. They had never fought humans. Admiral Sullivan gathered every available ship and pilot. Commercial spacecraft were fitted with weapons. Old military vessels were pulled out of storage and repaired. Earth's moon bases were armed with missiles and energy cannons. It would not be enough to win, but it might be enough to hurt the enemy. Lisa spent the last day before the invasion learning everything Zara Lynn could teach her about Zephyrian ships. The alien woman showed her weak points in their design and explained how their weapons worked. Most importantly, she taught Lisa about Zephyrian psychology. They valued order and predictability above all else. Chaos confused them. As the enemy fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, humans around the world watched the news broadcasts. For the first time in history, every nation on Earth was united. Old enemies worked together to defend their shared home. The planet's entire population became part of the war effort. Zara Lynn stood beside Dr. Foster in the command center, watching the approaching ships on the main screen. She had risked everything to warn Earth about what was coming. Now she could only hope that humans really were as unpredictable and stubborn as their broadcasts had suggested. If they were like every other species, Earth would fall within days. If they were different, maybe there was still hope for her people and countless others enslaved by the Zephyrian Empire. The Zephyrian fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a storm cloud, blotting out the stars. Admiral Vexathari stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the small blue planet with satisfaction. Earth would be another easy conquest to add to his record. His crimson-hulled dreadnoughts stretched for miles in every direction, their weapons charged and ready. Captain Lisa Martinez felt her stomach clench as the enemy ships appeared on her scanner. The Aurora was humanity's pride, but next to these alien monsters, it looked like a toy. Each Zephyrian dreadnought was 10 times larger than Earth's biggest space station. Their hulls gleamed like blood-red metal, and energy crackled between weapon ports that could level entire cities. Admiral Vexathari opened a communication channel to Earth. His voice was cold and mechanical as it reached every radio and television on the planet. The Zephyrian Empire had come to claim Earth. Humans had 2 choices: surrender immediately and become workers for the Empire, or resist and face complete destruction. He gave Earth's leaders 1 hour to decide. In the command center, Admiral Kate Sullivan looked at the faces around her. World leaders appeared on screens from every continent. For the first time in human history, they all agreed on something. Earth would not surrender without a fight. The decision was unanimous and immediate. Dr. Amy Foster translated the human response for Zara Lynn, who closed her eyes and whispered what sounded like a prayer in her musical language. No species had ever refused the Zephyrian ultimatum. The alien woman knew what came next would be terrible, but she also felt something she had not experienced in years: hope. Lisa Martinez launched from Earth's orbital platform, along with every pilot brave enough to fly into certain death. Her squadron included commercial pilots flying cargo ships loaded with explosives, teenagers who had trained on flight simulators, and veterans from every air force on Earth. They had no uniforms and no matching equipment, but they all had the same desperate determination. The first human ship to engage the enemy was a converted mining vessel piloted by a woman named Beth Parker. She flew straight at a Zephyrian destroyer, ignoring the energy bolts that lit up space around her. When her shields failed and her hull began to melt, she did something no Zephyrian had ever seen. She aimed her ship directly at the enemy vessel and rammed it at full speed. Admiral Vexathari watched in confusion as the tiny human ship destroyed one of his destroyers. The explosion was impressive, but losing one ship meant nothing. What bothered him was the tactic itself. Ramming attacks wasted valuable equipment and pilots. It made no logical sense. Lisa Martinez led her fighters in a swarm attack against a Zephyrian cruiser. Instead of engaging in traditional formation, combat, the human pilots scattered in all directions, firing randomly and using debris from destroyed ships as cover. They flew in patterns that seemed chaotic, but were actually carefully coordinated through radio chatter the aliens could not decode. Commander Nancy Roberts coordinated the defense from Earth's surface. Every missile silo and orbital platform opened fire at once. Most of the weapons were too primitive to penetrate Zephyrian shields, but the sheer volume of incoming fire forced the enemy ships to maneuver. This created opportunities for the human pilots to strike at weak points. Zara Lynn worked frantically at a computer terminal, intercepting Zephyrian battle communications and translating them for Dr. Foster. The enemy commanders were reporting confusion and requesting new orders. They were not used to fighting opponents who seemed to ignore military doctrine entirely. A second alien ship appeared in Earth's orbital space, but this one was different. It was smaller and badly damaged, clearly running from something. Dr. Foster received a transmission in the same language Zara Lynn spoke. The ship contained Valorian refugees who had escaped during the confusion of the battle. Kira Vel was among the refugees, and when she saw Zara Lynn alive on Earth's communication system, both sisters began crying tears of joy. Kira Vel was an engineer who had been forced to work on Zephyrian ships. She knew their technology better than almost any non-Zephyrian alive. The battle continued for 6 hours. Human losses were catastrophic, but they were achieving something impossible. They were hurting the Zephyrian fleet. 3 destroyers had been destroyed by ramming attacks. A cruiser had been disabled when human pilots coordinated to overload its shields. Most importantly, the humans were not breaking. Admiral Vexathari found himself in an unfamiliar position. His fleet still had overwhelming superiority, but his crews were reporting problems he had never encountered. Human ships appeared to be everywhere at once. Their pilots took insane risks that somehow paid off. Their tactics made no sense but were surprisingly effective. Lisa Martinez barely survived when her ship's engine was hit by enemy fire. She managed to crash land on Earth's moon, where lunar defense crews pulled her from the wreckage. As medics treated her burns, she continued to coordinate attacks through her helmet radio. The battle was far from over. The turning point came when a group of civilian pilots flying converted passenger jets managed to penetrate the Zephyrian formation. They were not trying to destroy ships, but to rescue the crews of disabled human vessels. This act of bravery in the middle of a hopeless battle stunned even the Zephyrian soldiers. General Roberts made the decision to withdraw Earth's remaining forces before they were completely wiped out. The humans had lost most of their ships and hundreds of brave pilots, but they had proven something important. The Zephyrian Empire could be hurt. As the surviving human ships retreated to prepared positions near Earth's moon, Admiral Vexathari called for his commanders to report. The tactical situation was clear. His fleet controlled Earth's orbital space. But something was wrong. His officers described the human resistance in terms he had never heard before: unpredictable, chaotic, and utterly fearless. Dr. Foster and the Valorian refugees worked through the night to establish secure communications with resistance groups throughout the galaxy. For the first time in decades, hope was spreading among the enslaved species. If humans could make the mighty Zephyrian fleet retreat even temporarily, perhaps the Empire was not invincible after all. Zara Lynn and Kira Vel began sharing their technical knowledge with human engineers. The sisters had spent years studying Zephyrian technology while planning their escape. Now they could help Earth's defenders understand how to fight back more effectively. As Admiral Vexathari prepared for the next phase of the invasion, he sent a report to the Zephyrian High Command. Earth was not behaving like other conquered worlds. The humans were dangerous in ways he could not fully explain. He requested additional ships and new tactics specifically designed for this unusual enemy. The first battle was over, but the war for Earth's freedom had only just begun. 3 months after losing the battle for Earth's orbital space, humanity had gone underground. Cities around the world buzzed with activity beneath the surface as people worked frantically to build a resistance that could strike back at their alien occupiers. The Zephyrians controlled the skies, but they had never faced an enemy that could disappear into tunnels and emerge anywhere. Captain Lisa Martinez had recovered from her injuries and now led raid teams that struck at Zephyrian supply convoys. Her new ship was a hybrid creation built from salvaged human technology and parts stolen from alien vessels. It looked strange, but flew faster and hit harder than anything the enemy expected to encounter. Dr. Amy Foster had established the most unusual laboratory in human history deep beneath the ruins of New York City. Valorian refugees worked alongside human scientists, sharing knowledge that had been gathered across dozens of worlds. The air hummed with translated conversations as species that had never met before learned to work together. Zara Lynn stood before a holographic map showing the galaxy, pointing to star systems where other resistance movements were fighting the Zephyrian Empire. Her message was simple but revolutionary. Earth's unexpected success had inspired rebellions on 17 different worlds. The Empire was fighting on more fronts than ever before in its history. Major Kelly Stone specialized in what the military called acquisition missions, but everyone else called theft. She led teams that raided Zephyrian installations to steal technology, weapons, and most importantly, information. Her latest target was a communication relay that could connect Earth to resistance movements throughout the galaxy. The raid began at midnight when Stone's team emerged from maintenance tunnels beneath the Zephyrian facility. They moved like shadows, through corridors designed for aliens, using modified equipment that Kiravel had helped them build. The Valorian engineer had spent years studying every detail of Zephyrian technology while planning her own escape. Lyra Shan was a Valorian warrior who had fought the Empire for longer than most humans had been alive. She taught Earth's soldiers how to use captured energy weapons and how to move without triggering alien motion sensors. Her combat skills were legendary among her people, and now she was training humans to fight with the same deadly efficiency. President Monica Davis addressed the world from a secure bunker in Colorado. Every major government had relocated underground, but they continued to function and coordinate the global resistance effort. Her speech was broadcast through hidden transmitters to billions of people living in occupied cities above ground. The president announced that Earth had successfully contacted 12 different species fighting the Zephyrian Empire. More importantly, they had begun sharing technology and tactical information. Humanity was no longer fighting alone, but as part of a galactic alliance that spanned hundreds of worlds. Major Stone's team reached the communication relay and began the delicate work of accessing its systems without triggering security protocols. Kiravel guided them through alien computer interfaces while monitoring for patrol ships that might discover their presence. The work required perfect coordination between human reflexes and Valorian technical knowledge. Dr. Foster made a breakthrough. That changed everything. Working with Valorian scientists, she had decoded the basic principles behind faster-than-light communication. Earth could now send messages instantly across the galaxy instead of relying on the slow process of physical courier ships. The implications were staggering. Zarlin used the new communication system to contact resistance leaders on worlds she had not spoken to in years. The conversations that followed revealed the true scope of the Galactic Rebellion. The Sylvani had developed new materials that could resist Zephyrian energy weapons. The Korath had created medical treatments that could heal injuries from alien torture devices. The crystalline Nexari had built quantum computers that could break enemy encryption codes. Lisa Martinez received word that a Zephyrian supply convoy would be passing through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The convoy carried enough weapons and equipment to supply an entire planetary occupation force. It was also defended by 3 destroyers and a battle cruiser, making it seemingly impossible to attack. The plan Lisa developed would have been considered insane by traditional military standards. Instead of engaging the convoy with a conventional fleet, she would use a swarm of small ships hidden throughout the asteroid field. Each ship would be piloted by a single person and armed with experimental weapons designed by the human Valorian research teams. Lyra Shan volunteered to lead one of the attack groups, flying a modified human fighter alongside pilots who had learned everything they knew about combat from watching old movies. The combination of ancient warrior instincts and human creativity proved to be devastatingly effective. The attack began when Major Stone's team successfully hacked the communication relay and sent false orders to the convoy escorts. Half of the Zephyrian ships broke formation to investigate a fake distress signal, leaving the supply vessels vulnerable to attack. Lisa Martinez led the main assault, coordinating dozens of small ships through the asteroid field while avoiding detection by enemy sensors. The human pilots used the rocks as cover and moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually based on mathematical principles discovered by Dr. Foster's research teams. When the attack began, chaos erupted throughout the convoy. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, fired their weapons, and disappeared again before the Zephyrians could respond. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Kiravel monitored enemy communications from her position aboard Lisa's ship, translating the increasingly frantic reports from Zephyrian commanders. The convoy was taking heavy damage and requesting immediate reinforcement, but the nearest Imperial fleet was 3 days away. The battle lasted only 2 hours, but when it ended, the entire Zephyrian supply convoy had been destroyed or captured. Earth's forces had gained enough weapons and equipment to supply resistance movements on a dozen worlds. More importantly, they had proven that coordinated attacks could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Dr. Foster established secure communication links with resistance leaders across the galaxy, creating a network that allowed instant coordination of attacks and sharing of intelligence. For the first time since the Zephyrian Empire began its expansion, the occupied worlds could work together as a unified force. Admiral Vexithari received reports of the convoy attack while dealing with rebellions on 6 other worlds. His empire was fighting more enemies than ever before, and they all seemed to be using the same chaotic tactics that had proven so effective against his fleet at Earth. The humans had become a virus that was spreading throughout his orderly empire. Zara Lynn and her sister worked with human engineers to reverse engineer captured Zephyrian faster-than-light drives. If Earth could build ships capable of interstellar travel, the Resistance could take the war directly to the Empire's homeworlds instead of simply defending against invasion. President Davis announced that Earth was formally joining what had become known as the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Humanity would provide tactical expertise and innovative weapons technology in exchange for advanced scientific knowledge and mutual defense agreements with alien species that had been fighting the Empire for decades. As winter approached, the underground cities had become thriving centers of human-alien cooperation. Children learned alien languages, while their parents worked alongside beings from distant stars. The Resistance was growing stronger every day, and for the first time since the invasion began, people were talking about victory instead of just survival. 6 months after the Zephyrian invasion began, Captain Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of a ship unlike any other in the galaxy. The Phoenix was built from human engineering and Valorian technology, crewed by soldiers from 12 different species, and armed with weapons that had never existed before the Resistance began sharing knowledge. Operation Phoenix was the largest coordinated attack in the history of the Galactic Rebellion. Resistance forces on 37 worlds would strike simultaneously at Zephyrian command centers, supply depots, and communication networks. The goal was not just to hurt the Empire, but to cripple its ability to coordinate responses to future attacks. Dr. Amy Foster had become Earth's first ambassador to alien species, negotiating agreements that would have been impossible just months earlier. The Sylvani had agreed to provide their nearly indestructible hull materials. The Korath were sharing medical technology that could keep wounded fighters alive long enough to continue fighting. The Nexari had contributed quantum computers that could predict enemy movements with startling accuracy. Admiral Kate Sullivan coordinated the attack from a hidden base built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. Screens around her showed the positions of Allied fleets throughout the galaxy, each group waiting for the signal to begin the largest military operation in galactic history. Earth was providing tactical leadership for species that had been fighting longer than humans had existed. Zara Lynn worked with human strategists to identify the most critical targets in the Zephyrian command structure. Years of studying the Empire from within had taught her exactly how their military operated. She knew which installations were truly important and which ones only appeared to be significant. The first target was Orbital Station Gamma, which controlled Zephyrian operations throughout Earth's solar system. Major Kelly Stone led the assault team that would disable the station's defenses while Lisa Martinez's fleet moved in for the main attack. The operation required perfect timing and absolute precision. Kiravel had spent weeks modifying human stealth technology with Valorian improvements. The result was ships that could become nearly invisible to Zephyrian sensors for brief periods. The technology was experimental and dangerous, but it gave the Resistance a crucial advantage in the opening moments of each attack. Narration commanded a strike force composed entirely of former slaves who had escaped from Zephyrian worlds. These warriors had personal reasons for fighting that went beyond military objectives. They knew exactly how the Empire treated conquered populations, and they were determined to make sure it never happened again. The attack began at exactly midnight, Earth time, when Resistance forces throughout the galaxy struck their targets simultaneously. The coordination was so precise that Zephyrian commanders initially thought they were facing a single massive fleet that could somehow be in dozens of places at once. Lisa Martinez led her hybrid human-alien fleet against Orbital Station Gamma, using tactics that had become the signature of Earth's military forces. Instead of approaching in formation, her ships scattered across three-dimensional space and attacked from every possible angle. The Zephyrians found themselves trying to defend against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. Major Stones. Infiltration team had successfully disabled the station's primary weapons, but secondary systems were still online and firing at the approaching fleet. Stone made a decision that would have horrified traditional military commanders. She ordered her team to surrender to Zephyrian security forces. The surrender was part of a larger plan developed by Dr. Foster and Zara Lynn. Human prisoners were typically taken to the station's detention center for interrogation, but Stone's team was carrying concealed explosives that would detonate once they were inside the most secure part of the facility. Admiral Vexathari watched from his flagship as reports poured in from across his empire. Rebellions were erupting simultaneously on worlds that had been peaceful for decades. His forces were fighting battles on more fronts than they had ships to defend. Worst of all, the rebels were using human tactics that his officers could not counter effectively. Kiravel activated the stealth systems as Lisa's fleet approached the station's main docking bays. For 30 seconds, the human ships were nearly invisible to enemy sensors. It was enough time to penetrate the station's defensive perimeter and begin landing troops in the heart of the facility. The battle for Orbital Station Gamma became a close-quarters fight between human marines and Zephyrian soldiers in corridors designed for beings twice as tall as most humans. The smaller human fighters used their size advantage to move through maintenance shafts and ventilation systems, appearing behind enemy positions and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Lyra Shan's strike force hit a Zephyrian supply depot on the far side of Earth's moon, capturing enough weapons and equipment to arm resistance movements on 6 additional worlds. More importantly, they rescued over 200 Valorian prisoners who had been working as slave laborers in the depot's factories. Dr. Foster received reports from resistance leaders throughout the galaxy as Operation Phoenix continued. The attacks were succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. Zephyrian forces were retreating from positions they had held for years, and neutral species were beginning to openly support the rebellion. President Monica Davis announced from her secure command center that 3 previously neutral alien governments had formally joined the Galactic Liberation Alliance. The hegemony of free worlds was offering sanctuary to refugees from Zephyrian-occupied territories. The Council of Independent Systems was providing ships and weapons to resistance movements. Most significantly, the ancient and powerful consortium had broken centuries of isolation to condemn Zephyrian expansion. Major Stone's explosive charges detonated in the heart of Orbital Station Gamma's command center, destroying the computers that coordinated Zephyrian operations throughout Earth's solar system. The explosion also created enough chaos for Stone's team to escape through maintenance tunnels they had mapped during earlier reconnaissance missions. Lisa Martinez found herself in direct combat with Admiral Vexathari's personal escort squadron as they tried to evacuate the crippled station. The Zephyrian ships were individually superior to anything in her fleet, but they were designed for formal military engagements. The human tactics of scattered attacks and unpredictable movements proved devastatingly effective. The Phoenix engaged Vexathari's flagship in a running battle through the debris field created by the station's destruction. Both ships traded devastating blows while maneuvering through twisted metal and burning gases. The alien admiral had never faced an opponent who fought with such apparent disregard for military doctrine. Zara Lynn coordinated with resistance leaders on 17 worlds as the second phase of Operation Phoenix began. Now that the initial attacks had disrupted Zephyrian communications, rebel forces were launching follow-up strikes against targets of opportunity. The Empire's rigid command structure was collapsing under the pressure of fighting an enemy that refused to follow predictable patterns. The battle ended when Admiral Vexathari's flagship suffered critical damage and was forced to retreat. Lisa Martinez could have pursued and destroyed the enemy vessel, but instead she chose to rescue survivors from both sides of the battle. This act of mercy, broadcast across the galaxy, demonstrated that the rebellion was fighting for freedom rather than revenge. As reports came in from across the galaxy, the scope of the victory became clear. Operation Phoenix had succeeded in crippling Zephyrian military operations on 43 worlds. More importantly, it had proven that the Empire could be defeated by coordinated resistance forces working together across vast distances. Dr. Foster began negotiations with defeated Zephyrian commanders who were willing to discuss terms for ending the war. Many enemy officers had grown tired of fighting an increasingly unpopular expansion campaign and were ready to consider alternatives to continued conquest. The success of Operation Phoenix marked a turning point in the Galactic War. For the first time since the Zephyrian Empire began its expansion, the occupied worlds had seized the initiative and forced their enemies to react to resistance moves rather than dictating the terms of engagement. The final battle for galactic freedom would not be fought at Earth, but at Dominax Prime, the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. Captain Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of the Liberation, flagship of the largest fleet in galactic history. Ships from 47 different species stretched across space like a metal constellation, all united by their hatred of Zephyrian oppression. Admiral Kate Sullivan had argued against the desperate assault, but the Galactic Liberation Alliance had voted unanimously to strike at the Empire's capital world. Intelligence gathered by resistance movements indicated that the Zephyrian military was on the verge of collapse, but their leaders were planning one final massive attack that would destroy every rebellious world simultaneously. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically to coordinate surrender negotiations with moderate Zephyrian officials who wanted to end the war. But time was running out. The Empire's hardline faction, led by Admiral Vex Thari, was preparing to launch planet-killing weapons at rebel strongholds. The only way to stop them was to capture or destroy the command centers on Dominax Prime. Zara Lynn had returned to lead the Valorian Liberation Fleet, but her heart remained with the human friends who had given her people hope when all seemed lost. She commanded 300 ships crewed by former slaves who had spent years dreaming of this moment. Today they would either win their freedom or die in the attempt. The Allied fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Dominax system to find the Zephyrian home fleet waiting for them. Admiral Vexathari had assembled every remaining ship in the Empire for this final confrontation. His Crimson dreadnoughts outnumbered the Allied forces 2-1, and they were fighting in their own territory with the support of massive orbital defense platforms. Major Kelly Stone led the first wave of assault troops in captured Zephyrian transport ships. Her mission was to infiltrate the planetary defense network and disable the weapons that could destroy entire continents. The transports were filled with warriors from dozens of species, all veterans of the long campaign against the Empire. Kira Vell had developed the most advanced stealth technology in the galaxy by combining human innovation with alien science. The Ghost Protocol allowed ships to phase partially out of normal space for brief periods, making them impossible to target with conventional weapons. It was dangerous and untested on this scale, but it might be the key to victory. Lyra Shan commanded the assault on the Imperial Palace, where the Zephyrian Emperor and his War Council were directing the final defense. Her troops were entirely volunteers who had lost families and homeworlds to the Empire. They would accept nothing less than complete surrender or the total destruction of the Zephyrian leadership. The battle began when Lisa Martinez activated the Ghost Protocol and led her fleet through the seemingly impenetrable defensive perimeter around Dominax Prime. For 30 seconds, half the Allied fleet existed in a shadow dimension where enemy weapons could not reach them. They emerged inside the defensive line and began attacking the planet's orbital weapons platforms. Admiral Vexathari found himself fighting the same chaotic enemy that had frustrated him since the first battle at Earth. Human ships appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating force, and vanished again before his gunners could respond. The orderly formations he favored were useless against an enemy that refused to fight according to established military doctrine. Dr. Foster received a communication from the Zephyrian Emperor himself, offering to negotiate a ceasefire if the Allied forces would spare the civilian population of Dominax Prime. The message was broadcast across the galaxy, showing that even the Empire's supreme leader was ready to consider surrender rather than face total destruction. Major Stone's infiltration. Teams fought their way through the underground complexes beneath Dominax Prime's capital city. The Zephyrian defenders were tough and well-equipped, but they had never faced opponents who combined human tactical flexibility with the combat experience of veteran alien warriors. The turning point came when Kira Vell successfully hacked into the planetary defense network and turned the orbital weapons against the Zephyrian fleet. Massive energy beams that had been designed to destroy attacking fleets instead carved through Admiral Vexathari's formation, destroying dozens of ships in seconds. Narration reached the Imperial Palace just as the Emperor's guards were preparing to execute captured resistance leaders. The battle for the throne room was brief but vicious, with alien warriors fighting hand-to-hand against opponents who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Lisa Martinez found herself in single combat with Admiral Vexathari as their flagships, engaged in a deadly dance around Dominax Prime's burning cities. Both commanders had fought each other across the galaxy, and this final duel would determine the fate of billions of sentient beings. The Liberation and Vexathari's dreadnought traded devastating blows while maneuvering through the debris of the shattered orbital defenses. Neither ship could gain a decisive advantage until Lisa made a decision that perfectly exemplified human tactical thinking. She rammed her heavily damaged vessel into the enemy flagship at maximum speed. Both ships were destroyed in the collision, but Lisa and her crew had ejected in escape pods moments before impact. Admiral Vexathari was not so fortunate. The destruction of his flagship and the death of the Empire's most successful military commander broke the will of the remaining Zephyrian forces. Zaralin coordinated the surrender of Zephyrian fleets throughout the galaxy as news of the victory at Dominax Prime spread across the communication networks. Without central leadership and facing rebellions on every occupied world, Imperial commanders began laying down their weapons rather than continuing a hopeless fight. Dr. Foster found herself negotiating the terms of the largest surrender in galactic history. Representatives from dozens of species gathered on Dominax Prime to establish the framework for a new interstellar government based on cooperation rather than conquest. Earth was chosen as the headquarters for the Galactic Cooperation Council. The Zephyrian Empire officially ceased to exist when the Emperor signed the Treaty of Galactic Liberation in the same throne room where his ancestors had planned the conquest of countless worlds. The document established rights for all sentient species and created mechanisms for peaceful resolution of conflicts between star systems. President Monica Davis became the first Secretary General of the Galactic Cooperation Council, leading a government that included representatives from over 200 different species. The diversity that had once seemed like a weakness for the rebellion became the foundation for a stronger and more just galactic civilization. Lisa Martinez survived the destruction of her ship and was offered command of the new Galactic Defense Force, but she chose instead to retire and establish the first integrated military academy. The school would train officers from all member species to work together using the tactical innovations that had defeated the Empire. Major Stone became the director of the Interspecies Intelligence Service, an organization dedicated to preventing future attempts at galactic conquest. Her teams included former resistance fighters from across the galaxy who understood the importance of remaining vigilant against those who would threaten freedom. Zaralin returned to her homeworld to lead the reconstruction of Valorian civilization, but she maintained close ties with Earth and visited regularly. The friendship between humans and Valorians became a model for cooperation between species with very different cultures and capabilities. The war was over, but the work of building a lasting peace had only just begun. The galaxy was free, but freedom required constant vigilance and the willingness to fight for what was right. Humanity had proven that even the most powerful empire could be defeated by people who refused to surrender their liberty. Dr. Foster established the first interspecies university on Earth, where young beings from hundreds of worlds could learn together and prepare for a future where cooperation replaced conquest. The children of former enemies played together in the same classrooms, building friendships that would last for generations. As the first year of galactic peace came to an end, memorials were built on every liberated world to honor those who had died fighting for freedom. The largest memorial was placed in Earth's orbit, where the first battle against the Zephyrian Empire had begun. It bore a simple inscription in the languages of all member species. Freedom is never free, but it is always worth the price.